So, update 2.12. This is a big one, ladies and gentlemen. I'm trying to get through this quickly, but this might be a longer video because there is just so much to talk about. Let's start very quickly with 5v5 access. You do get access to 5v5 in 2.12 if you have a golden ticket. There's loads of great content that you can create, check out if you want to go and check out a creator like FlashX, myself, or Broken Myth. All of these guys are fantastic, especially Flash and Broken Myth. They are some incredible content creators. I thoroughly recommend that you go and check out their stuff. We talked about the skin system in a couple of videos, but I will just go through it very quickly. The new skin system is moving away from cards and going to blueprints. Blueprints are the new single resource that you need to collect along with essence. All of your cards, even ones that go towards getting a blueprint unlocked, will be refunded to you at full crafting value. So if you've got a big card collection, expect to get a massive essence payout. Then you need to use that essence along with blueprints to unlock new skins. The grandfathering system, which means essentially you get given something for free as the new system changes, is about how many cards you own of a certain skin. So you can see here that we've got Candy Twirl Koshka Legendary. You need to work out the cost, the value of these skins in total essence cost, including the commons. The essence cost does include the commons. And then you need to have 33% of that in non-common cards. So you need to take, what is it, like 6 times 8, 6 times 8. I think that's 30 times 8, 30 times 8, 120 times 4, 120 times 4, and then 360 times 3, 360 times 3. So take all of that math, add it together to its total value, divide it by 3, and then you need to use a combination of the rare cards, which are worth 30, the epic cards, which are worth 120, and the legendary cards, which are worth 360, to get to 33% of that value. So I hope that explained that well. This is probably the best explanation of it that I've done. So remember, the total cost of the card, of the skin, and you need 33% of that total cost in these cards, and the cost means it's essence value in cards, and you get the essence value by looking at what it costs to craft a card. It costs 6 to craft a common, 30 to craft a rare, 120 to craft an epic, and 360 to craft a legendary. So 3 legendaries for this skin would be worth 1080 essence, because it's 360 times 3. So, hope you guys have this day now to figure out what you want to do with your cards and get the skins that you want. That's what you need to figure out for every skin, okay? You get to see on the new system which blueprints you've unlocked. There'll be a little green square in the bottom left-hand corner. They're looking to bring back art collections in some way, but again, removing cards also has the benefit of creating space in the app for the 5v5 mode, which is going to be big, obviously. This is something that I found particularly interesting. It's going to be more random to get a skin now, so you're not going to be able to grind it as easily as you did by saving up essence and buying cards for free. You still will be able to get things for free because blueprints will be obtained through chests, but the overall skin prices with ice is going down, and I think that is a good change for Vainglory personally. One of my problems with Vainglory has always been that the skin price is so high. Like, the skin quality is very good, don't get me wrong. Skin quality is very good, but the price is quite high. And I think the price was high because it's quite easy to grind for free. Like, you could grind any of the skins in the game for free. Now it's going to be harder to get the skin that you want. Yes, you'll be able to get skins, but you won't really be able to target the skin that you want. But it will be cheaper if you want to buy the skin that you want, which I think is better for Vainglory as a business. So, hopefully this system will be good. And again, Golden Netherlight Lance. Okay, this is the UI change. They kind of darkened the blue, from what I know, and they kind of cleaned up a little bit of the UI visuals. Obviously, a lot of people had strong feelings about this, and I know this probably won't be the final version. This is like a version that is getting released to the public so that you can test it and give proper feedback once you've tested it. I personally think this is going to be a lot easier for you guys to navigate, and I think it'll be a lot more accessible for new players as well. So I think this is a good UI change. I do agree that maybe the colors could do with some tweaking, but I think the structure of the UI, the way that it flows and the way that you use it is good. So yeah, iPhone X optimization, woo! If anyone has an iPhone X, this is, I know Kraken was really excited about this. I know he was talking about it at Worlds. This is a iPhone X optimization that's taken a while to get right, but it is a full iPhone X optimization, which is good. Not just stretching the game out, this is proper iPhone X optimization, which is really nice. Another thing that I'm really excited about, free camera. I talked about it in my 5v5 video, but free camera allows you to tap a button, swipe the screen, and move the camera away from your hero to be able to look across the map without having to click on the minimap. So it's a little bit more accurate than clicking on the minimap. It also means you can use it to assess the field in a fight. You can really use it to your full advantage in the game mode. So I think the free camera edition is an amazing addition to the way that you control and play Vainglory. Scoreboard has been updated. You get the worth of each hero in gold. You get the ultimate ability cooldown, so you don't have to go in when your friends or your teammates' abilities aren't up because you didn't see. The creep minion score calculation has been updated to reflect the exact number of creatures killed instead of being based on gold, which is great because that works more like a traditional MOBA now. Also, team's worth, so you'll be able to see exactly how much gold you are behind in a game, so you know if you should or shouldn't fight. You can now use a bit more of an updated social tab, so you can mute players, you can add players. You know, it just separates out the social to the gameplay, which I think makes it a bit cleaner. Okay, so we're getting new messages, including useful 5v5 messages. Basically, I think they are essentially trying to just increase the breadth and usefulness of the messages that you have when you're using those pings, those quick messages. So hopefully you guys will be able to use those and give your feedback whether we need more or not. That'll be good. Level caps increased. This is not so important for me, but I think a lot of people will enjoy the fact that you've got a bit more grinding to come. And I know they're going to look to continue to update that as we go. It might end up being like an infinite one. Surrender for 5v5, you need 4 out of 5. Golden Netherite Lance, these are all the skins, these cool skins, blah blah blah. We're gameplay, we don't care about skins. Right. Now we're into balance changes. So let's take a look at the gold bounty changes. Essentially, all of the minions have had their gold income reduced. So in general, you'll grind gold a little bit slower than you would have done previously just by farming. This might not seem like a big change because the gold value changes are so low, but what you will notice, this is an 8% reduction in sort of minion income in the lane, which means that the late game heroes like Baron that require 3 to 4 items to function, usually they could sort of rely on farming safely in the early game to get to that. Now it's going to be slightly more difficult to do that, so late game heroes aren't going to be coming online at 13 minutes anymore. You're probably looking at coming online between 14 and 15 minutes. That's an extra minute if you are an early game focused composition to try and take an advantage. Because there was a point in Vainglory where if you just played a late game hero and got him to like 13 or 14 minutes without feeding, like you had your full build and you'd start to wreck people. So this is going to give early game compositions a little bit more breathing room in the early game to sort of make those plays. It's not going to extend the game time by that much, although it will extend the game time slightly unless it does force a shift into early game compositions. But it does mean that late game heroes are going to take a little bit longer to come online. So like Baron, for instance, Kestrel, Weapon Power Kestrel, they're going to take a bit longer to get the items that they need. Hero balance changes, and there are a lot of them. I haven't read them all myself. This is what I was going to do. I was going to read them and go through them with you. Okay, so we're updating Adagio's range. Okay, this is first thing to note is that most of these changes will apply to 5v5 and 3v3. They can't separately balance the heroes unless it's for some certain abilities. Basic attack range has been increased. Basic move speed has been increased. Okay, Weapon Power Adagio was a pocket pick before. Weapon Power Adagio is going to be even more of a pick this update. It also means that the CP Adagio build path will be again a little bit more relevant. That 0.1 range increase is going to, even for maybe not for the average player, but the top tier players probably will find Adagio to be a bit more viable again because his move speed's been upped, he'll be able to kite easier, and that 0.1 range increase gives him a slight edge over certain heroes. Also means casting his ultimate, especially in 5v5, is going to be a lot harder to chunk him through, so he's going to be a bit safer in 3v3, well, a lot safer in 3v3 casting his ultimate because he was pretty vulnerable. The problem with this is that you're going to find that the 3v3 meta is going to be kind of wonky for a bit, but we'll see what happens. Almost everybody's having their base movement speed increase. Maximum reboot time changed to 3.5 seconds. Energy recharge changed to 20% to 0%. Reboot health increased from that. So basically, it's now she always reses at 3.5 seconds. Because there was a point in 3v3 where you saw Alpha res really quickly. Like she would just like go into infinite reboot and be up within like a second. So this just means that there's always going to be 3.5 seconds where Alpha is rebooting, which makes her more vulnerable. So you have to be more careful about engaging fights and using your ultimate. Stack duration has gone up, and healing per stack has been reduced. So basically means that you don't have to go in on those core charge stacks straight away. You have a bit more time to work out and find the best option to engage. So there we go. It also means that, like Nivmet said, especially with the increased map size, you want to be able to farm quickly in the jungle. You want to have those 3 core charge stacks, and 5.5 seconds probably just isn't enough to get between camps on 5v5 without losing them, and they're pretty important to the speed of Alpha's clear. Blood for Blood to have more range. Lava Team Fates increased its cooldown. Okay, so the range of Vanguard has gone up and the cooldown has been increased. Blood for Blood range has gone up and the cooldown has been increased. And the Gauntlet has been increased in cooldown as well. Gauntlet is a very strong ability in 5v5. This also gives him more range to bail out teammates. In general, Arden's still going to be good, but because obviously you max Vanguard first anyway, it just means in the early game he's not going to be quite as overwhelming. He'll have a bit more range, but the cooldown increase does mean that the Vanguard changes make Arden a little bit weaker. Blood for Blood range being increased. I mean, I don't know how much that really means in the grand scheme of things for Arden's sort of viability as a captain, but maybe he'll be a bit more annoying in Blitz. It also means he can just close distances a bit better. If he's trying to close a distance to get to a Vanguard range, that'll be slightly better. In general, I think Arden's still going to remain the same. He's not going to really change from where he is. The biggest nerf for me is the cooldown on the Gauntlet increase. For 3v3, that's pretty significant because this was such a massive cooldown that you needed to fight in a pretty quick-paced game mode. Let's have a look. Batiste, Fearsome Shade, has gone up in cooldown, but also up in damage. This is a pretty strong ability in 5v5. They don't want you to have it all the time. And again, not much change to Batiste there. The cooldown increase on his ultimate means that Captain Batiste might suffer a little bit, but with Echo, he kind of never really had an issue anyway. Let's have a look, because Baron is very, very good in 5v5, by the way, guys. He's overpowered in 5v5 just because of that splash damage. He's had his base movement speed increased, splash damage reduced from 50%. I think this is a great change for Baron in general, not just in 5v5, but also for 3v3. Baron's splash damage being at 100% of his weapon power damage was just ridiculous. You didn't even need to focus a target. You could just hit somebody and it would deal damage to everything. This is, for me, the way that splash damage should work. It should always be less around the primary target area. So to compensate that, they've increased his attack speed slightly, but this is a massive nerf to Baron's overall viability in 3v3. He's not going to be as overwhelming, and with the gold changes as well, Baron is going to get hit a little bit. I think he'll still be good in 5v5 because pushing waves and minion control is really important, but this is the change that I think Baron needed a long time ago to stop him being sort of obnoxious when he gets to the late game in 3v3. Porcupine Mortar's getting a slight change because it was very, very strong in 5v5, because obviously if you hit multiple people in that Porcupine Mortar and you got a 35% slow on them, it's a great way to just control a team fight. Jump reduce, cooldown reduction from basic attacks decrease from... Okay, so also just means he's going to be slightly less mobile as well, because obviously he could reset that pretty quickly. In general, he's gotten a bit more mobile, but he's had a pretty big nerf. I think on 3v3, Baron's probably not going to be as viable, but on 5v5, we'll have to see. Still think he could hit the mark. Yeah, Blackfeather, not just for 5v5, but 3v3 has been a bit of a nuisance for a while. So he's been pretty obnoxious in most cases. Fate of Heart, the execute, has no longer got a weapon power ratio, so weapon power Blackfeather's not going to find as much success from executing people. It's more going to be a gap closer, so guys, you don't have to worry too much about saving that on your heartthrob stacks, you can just use it to close gaps now. Doesn't slow on hit. Whoa! Whoa! Poor Blackfeather. Jesus, I know he was overpowered, but I didn't think we were going to gut him. Okay, really, like, weapon power Blackfeather definitely doesn't seem as strong anymore, especially with the slow one on point. That means you're not going to be able to stick to your target as easily. The cooldown increase on Rose Offensive means you're going to have to carefully select when you use it a bit more often. Weapon power Blackfeather feels pretty dunzo. CP Blackfeather probably going to be okay, but without slowing on hit on the on point, I still think that's going to be tough for him. Blackfeather, he's gonna be tough to make work in 3v3. I still think he has a place as a split pusher in 5v5, but oh my goodness, 3v3 Blackfeather's not going to be nearly as good anymore, and definitely not top tier, and definitely not ban worthy, because that's a oh wow. Okay, let's move on. It's making me sad. Catherine's good in 5v5 just because of how good she can gank as a captain, and captains can use that river buff to move seamlessly between the mid lane and the top and bot lane. So she's had a stun nerf duration. Okay, so she gets to keep her Storm Guard slightly longer, but it does mean that that's interesting actually. They've made her Storm Guard slightly better. So Storm Guard's now slightly better, but her stun has been nerfed as well as her silence duration. So they basically nerfed Catherine's CC, but made her slightly tankier and reflects at slightly lower damage values with her Storm Guard. So Catherine's going to be slightly tankier now, and she's going to reflect more damage, but she's not going to be quite the CC machine that she was, especially without overdriving. I don't think it's worth overdriving the ult anymore unless you're worried about the cooldown, but that's a 0.6 second nerf to the overdriven ultimate value. And what, 0.2 seconds? How much difference does that really make when you could just probably increase the cooldown of Merciless Pursuit, or decrease the cooldown of Merciless Pursuit, and obviously you're maxing Storm Guard, so maybe not so worth it to max Blast Tremor anymore, and maybe you're maxing A and B. Base attack range decreased from 5.3. Heliogenesis. What? They're increasing the range of Heliogenesis? 3v3, that's going to be very strong. Like, I already thought that the range of Heliogenesis in 3v3 was good post level 8, but now she gets an increase at level 1 and gets another increase post level 8 as well. I think it's important to note that in 5v5, because of how many threats Celeste had at her, she has to, keep her range even more, because there were just too many threats for Celeste to deal with. So I think in 5v5 terms, this is a good change. I feel like this makes Celeste very, very powerful in 3v3 though, because all that she had is buffs here, and she was already pretty good in 3v3 in quite a decent amount of situations. And with the nerfs to Blackfeather, I think that this is going to make Celeste a very, very good 3v3 pick. So I think Celeste is good 3v3 right now, and this is going to make her slightly safer in 5v5. Let's have a look. 3v3 and 5v5, yep. Churnwalker has just been too strong for a while. Okay, so he's got reduced healing and reduced shared damage. I think that's good. It's not a massive nerf. I still think Churnwalker is viable, especially because they've increased the speed at which the chains land. Chains were painfully slow sometimes, and I think that's important. And the trespass cooldown was absolutely needed, although with some cooldown reduction, you'll see that it'll be a smaller change. You'll probably see a 10-second change or so. But whoa, that's pretty. I still think Churnwalker's viable. If anything, it's a 5% damage nerf, but I don't think that's enough to make Churnwalker off the meta. Churnwalker's still good. Flicker. Flicker's good 5v5, by the way. Flicker is really good 5v5. And True Sight while stealth means that he will be able to see other stealth heroes. So if there's an enemy attacker or something, he'll be able to see them, and that means that he'll be able to engage on them, and you can try and gank a stealth hero while you're stealth. Flicker is very good 5v5. Don't think this is going to make him any more viable 3v3 though. I don't know. Oh, I got confused by this line. Oh, all heroes will have True Sight while stealthed. Okay, well that's good. I still don't think it makes him viable 3v3 though. Flicker's problem in 3v3 is he's very snowbally, but in 5v5 that's good. Obviously Fortress is not going to spawn 5 wolves in 3v3, but he will spawn 3 wolves still, but he will spawn 5 wolves in 5v5. Lifesteal increased from that to that, duration increased from that to that, slow on the overdrive, and attack of the pack cooldown increased, and wolves base health increased. Okay, so wolves wanted to be a bit more tanky in 5v5, but now they're going to be very tanky in 3v3. I think this makes Fortress good. He was kind of fringe viable. This probably makes him still moderately viable. Fortress definitely going to be a strong 3v3 pick. I don't know how good he'll be on 5v5 because he doesn't really provide a huge amount of gank threat. But we'll see. He probably could be one of those junglers that could be brought into the meta. He's got a pretty slow clear though, and clear speed is quite important in 5v5. We'll see. It's hard to tell about the 5v5 meta because we don't know enough about it. Glaive. Yeah, he's been getting the balance hammer left, right, and center over the last couple of updates. Basic attack range increased, move speed increased, weapon power reduced, weapon power scaling increased. Okay, so they're going to make Glaive slightly less commanding in the first couple of levels, but will start to get stronger over the next 10 over the next 10 levels or so. Afterburn cooldown has been increased. Now stuns at the start of... Okay, so this means that you can actually reflex block the whole of the afterburn. But it's interesting that it stuns at the start of the knockback instead of the end, because that means that you're going to be stunned for the duration of the knockback. That may be why the stun duration has been increased. But I think this now means that you can reflex block both parts. Also, Afterburn was a very strong ability on 5v5 early on, so it's probably a good change. I still think Glaive will remain exactly as he was in the 3v3 meta. Afterburn is just a very good ability, no matter what the cooldown on it is. So Glaive will probably remain decent, stay in the same patch. Empowered basic attack now use the same benediction version. Empowered bonus damage reduced from that to that. Wow, okay. Weapon ratio reduced. Directional holy shield radius increased. Ally duration increased from that to that. So they're basically trying to push Grace into a more supportive role. She was very strong early on. Level 1, 20 extra damage on your basic attack was pretty ridiculous. It's now down to 10. It means that it's not going to be as easy to rush into the enemy. You maybe saw a video of me a couple of weeks ago with a saw where I stole their entire jungle. It's not going to be as easy to do that now, so you'll have to be a bit more careful about invading. It basically means that it's going to be easier to hit because it's matching the benediction version, which is a bigger cone. It's going to be easier to hit your empowered basic attack, but it's going to do less damage. So in general, it's going to make her far more supportive for sure. But it just means her early game threat was not going to be as much. Probably overall a decent buff to Grace as a captain. Move speed increased, slow strength increased, cooldown gone down. It's a little bit of love for Grumpjaw. A little bit of love for Grumpjaw. He doesn't spit out the target when stunned, which does mean that it's a little bit difficult to play around it. I actually think this is going to make Grumpjaw a bit more viable, because that was one of the reasons that Grumpjaw kind of sucked. If he got stunned during his stuff, then he just spat the hero out. This means that you could basically use that, and no matter what happens to Grumpjaw, even if he gets stunned, he should be able to reposition and get that hero into an awkward position to try and kill. So this might make Grumpjaw a bit more viable, especially on 5v5, but it's just a little bit of love for him because he needed it. Gwen, basic attack range. What? That's like a 1 basic... I mean, obviously, maybe for 5v5 she needs it, but that is going to make her really strong in 3v3. Okay, slow strength reduced to 0%. Has a weapon ratio, slow capped at 65%. Okay, so CP Gwen was quite obnoxious when you got her to a certain point in the game because of the slow on buckshot. I still think CP Gwen can be viable, but it definitely means in 3v3, especially when you don't have that kind of protection, that she's going to be harder to use. It was very strong in 5v5. CP Gwen was very strong in 5v5, so a 0% slow ratio on her. It's basically saying, screw you, CP Gwen, because you're obnoxious to play against sometimes. And now Weapon Power Gwen gets a pretty significant buff. This is really good for Weapon Power Gwen. In general, the range increase especially, this is going to make her a lot easier in lane to trade with certain heroes. So yeah, I think this is a really good change for Weapon Power Gwen, and I think she will be pretty decent in the meta. Let's have a look at Idris. He was kind of unloved for an update. He was in a pretty trash tier level. I know Dowsey was sad about it. Move speed increased. Everybody's getting a move. Most people are getting a move speed increase for 5v5. Bonus range increase from 3.6 to 3.8, so it's a 6.2 basic attack range, similar to what Gwen is. That's pretty good. Crystal Path now have a damage of 50 and 3 per level. And the Crystal Power basic attack lowered from... Okay, so he's going to scale up with levels, but in general is going to scale less with his CP items. So Crystal Path has a basic attack of 3, and then 3 per level, so what? It's 3 times 12. So you're going to get an extra 36 on top of that. So he's going to have a base at level 12 of 86 CP added to his basic attacks and a 75% crystal ratio. So it's just worth thinking about his build path and whether that is affected and how much CP difference 25% is going to make. 25%. You'd have to have a difference of, what, 80 something? Like, you'd have to have a difference of something like 200 and 320 something CP. Like, that's 344 CP. So this is actually a buff to Crystal Power Idris in the late game by quite a margin. Crystal ratio increased again, so that's going to make it more powerful. Shimmer Strike, cooldown increase, weapon ratio. So this is just a general net buff, especially for CP Idris. CP Idris is definitely going to come back into the meta. And especially for 3v3, that sounds pretty ridiculous. So 3v3 CP Idris is back. Rocket Leap, cooldown increased. Weapon ratio increased. Big red button, cooldown decreased, and damage per second decreased. Because it was pretty strong in 5v5, to be fair. But as a split pusher, weapon power duel, I know that those duel players, I'm looking at you, Sir James Lancelot, in high elo EU are going to love this, because really this just means that Duel's going to be able to just chunk down turrets more quickly, especially if she crits them. So yeah, this is going to be good for split push duel in 5v5, also going to be good for global objective control duel in 3v3. Weapon power duel is going to hit a lot harder. Well, a little bit harder. Basic attack range increased for Kestrel. I think she was in a good space anyway. I think Kestrel is kind of a pick that if you're good at Kestrel, you can play. Koshka's movement speed has gone up, which means she's going to move even quicker in with her heroic perk. Energy cost gone down, Twirly Death. Barrier per enemy hit hero for 1 second. Barrier strength with 30% crystal ratio per hit. Energy cost decreased. This is good. Very, very good for Koshka. Because in 5v5 especially, if you jump in with Pouncy Fun and use Twirly Death, like Twirly Death AoE damage just isn't that strong. So you need to give something that makes you a little bit more durable if you make that kind of engage. She's one of the least durable sort of bruisers in the game. And she's not quite high enough damage to be an assassin. So she's like halfway between an assassin and a bruiser, which means in 5v5 she just gets slaughtered because she's got no defensive capabilities. So I do think that's really important for Koshka. In 3v3, she's going to get a decent barrier. It definitely means she's going to be a bit harder to play against in 3v3. So yeah, I think this is going to make Koshka a very strong pick in 3v3, but it makes her viable in 5v5. Activation time decreased, move speed increased. Okay, so wow, Cruel's getting a little bit of a buff. Again, he probably needed it because he's so single target focused in 5v5. He needs to have something that gives him an edge, and this is going to make his ganking pattern a bit more relative. It also means he'll be able to clear the jungle quicker by getting between camps more easily. So yeah, I think Cruel needed something that brought him onto the table in 5v5, because splash damage is going to be very important, and because Cruel is pretty much single target focused, a lot of his presence is going to rely on ganking and snowballing the game and picking people off. So this is going to allow Cruel to be that niche pick in that instance. Take a look at Lance. Lance has always been high skill cap. Base health, I think this is important because Lance got a pretty significant nerf to his base health when all the health changes came through, and he wasn't very tanky. He's supposed to be a super tanky hero, so that's an important base health change. Damage decreased by... Whoa! Okay, so let's have a look. Damage reduction increase. This is basically making Lance more supportive. This is trying to push Lance into a captain role. That's a 200 damage decrease on his level 5 Impale. That's significant, like a really significant. This is going to make Weapon Power Lance a lot less viable. And in general, to be honest, this is going to make Lance captain much better. So this is Lance captain now. They're really pushing Lance into the captain role, Weapon Power Lances, and in terms of the damage output that Lance has in general, has been significantly decreased. I still think you can play Weapon Power Lance, but it's just definitely not going to be as good. Lorelei, attack range increased, fish food range increased, okay. Water will cooldown increased because water will cooldown was pretty low. Just some small changes to make her more viable on 5v5, but it's also going to make her a bit better on their 3v3, even on her CP route, because you have the increased range to fish food and her basic attack, so CP Lorelei is going to be a bit better to play with on 3v3, but also just makes her a bit more viable in general. Healing slow, scaling on slow increased. Okay, basically the slow on Principal Arcanum was sucking, so they just had to increase that slightly. They doubled the way that it increases. It's still a very low increase, but whatever. Imperial Sigil, healing amount per second reduced, cooldown changed and reduced. So increased early game but reduced late game. Okay. So they're basically nerfing the healing again, really trying to put pressure on Lyra's healing because she was very strong. They basically cut it in half. That's pretty ridiculous. Wow, that's a crazy nerf to the base healing of Lyra's Imperial Sigil. Bright Bulwark, duration increased from 2 to 4. No longer silences move abilities. It stops move abilities, but only when crossing the Bulwark radius. That's a pretty big nerf, especially on 3v3. Like, you picked Lyra if you wanted to deal with anybody like Vox, if you wanted to deal with people like Sky. Like, this no longer stops Suri Strike. This no longer stops Vox's Sonic Zoom. I don't know. I think that's pretty significant to Lyra, especially with the healing nerfs. I don't know how I feel about that. I think this has kind of gutted Lyra pretty significantly. She's going to have good area control in 5v5, but wow, that's a pretty significant gut to Lyra in general. I think this is going to make her way less viable on 3v3. Obviously, the healing is something that you'll always seek, but this is her 3v3 presence has been hit really hard. Maybe still viable in 5v5 because that zone control will be good, but I don't know. That's a pretty horrible nerf. Base movement speed increased. Bangarang travel speed increased. Ozo was in a good spot. They didn't really need to do much to Ozo. He's got some AoE damage that makes him good on 5v5. He was already pretty strong in the 3v3 meta, so Ozo's probably going to stay as he is. Okay, Munyon's stats, basic attack range increased, the weapon power petal feels good, man. Brambleboom Seeds, health increased from 30% 50% crystal ratio, and they've had a pretty significant buff in terms of their defenses. Cooldown increased, and duration increased. So the duration, I guess, of her increased range, and also the increased weapon power and CP. So maybe weapon power petal will find a space again. But in general, this is going to make Petal a bit filthier on 3v3. Petal was already a bit of a noob stomper, so if you want to stomp noobs, Petal's again just a good hero to play at the low elo because she's hard to play against. This means her minions are going to be even harder to kill. So in 3v3, Petal's going to be pretty filthy. Finn, a little bit of a movement speed increase. Feels bad, man, Finn. Rhyme. Move speed increased, Winter Spire ranged increased, Valkyrie stun duration decreased. Well, the stun duration wasn't that big of a deal. This is going to make Rhyme in a good spot. Like, Rhyme was already in a good spot. It's probably not going to increase, but with a 0.5 increase, it's not a massive increase. So it'll make him a bit more viable, but not a huge amount more viable. He's still got his specific scenarios that Rhyme is good. Cooldown increased. Okay, so that was probably pretty significant. But the dash range has been increased. So he could dash really, really quickly and really, really often. But the dash range has been slightly increased. So his mobility has gone up, but the cooldown on that mobility has gone up as well, meaning you've got a bit of a balance there. Twirling Silver cooldown increased, and basic attack speed bonus increased. So Ringo's going to be a bit more powerful in terms of what you get from Twirling Silver, but with Spell Sword you could get 100% uptime, and now Spell Sword, if you build that on Ringo, you're not going to get 100% uptime. You'll need to have a sort of extra cooldown reduction to get the 100% uptime on Twirling Silver. But it does mean that a almost doubling early game Twirling Silver basic attack speed means that Ringo's going to be able to duel quite significantly better when he has it up in the early games. So that's interesting. Whoa, Rona. Rona's been pretty significantly changed here. So the cooldown increased from Into the Fray. Fortified health has gone up, obviously. Fortified health duration has gone up. Base damage duration has been increased, and slow strength has been increased. Damage per second reduced, and crystal ratio increased. So they're trying to make CP Rona a thing, maybe. But what they're trying to do, basically, is that her mobility has gone down slightly, but they've increased her movement speed. They're also just trying to make her a bit tankier, but deal less ridiculous damage. Because in 5v5, like, she would just blend people. If you got into a good position with Rona and you hit Red Mist, you would blend the team up. So just reducing the damage that Rona does, especially in the late game, but trying to make her a bit more durable if you land your skills properly. Basic attack range has gone up. I mean, Samuel's in a good spot anyway. Okay, Saw. Basic attack range has gone up. Move speed penalty per stack decreased. Roadie run cooldown decreased. Suppressing fire rate. Whoa. Saw's getting a buff, boys. That's a pretty significant buff. Like, he's going to be slow. He's still going to be slow, obviously, when he's in spun up mode, but he's now got an increased attack range, which is going to be pretty obnoxious to deal with. Like, Saw was already tough to deal with at 6.5, and now he's at 6.8. That's huge. He was already good on 5v5 as a split pusher. Obviously, in teamfight situations, he sucked because you just got dove really easily, but as a split pusher, Saw was really good. This is going to make Saw in 3v3 very strong. So 3v3 Saw is definitely getting a massive buff here. Let's take a look at Scarf. Projectile speed normalized to an overall increase. Goop cooldown has gone down. The Goop slow has gone down. The slow strength has gone down as well on the fire one. Crystal ratio has gone down. Crystal ratio per second has gone down. Range has increased and base energy cost reduced. So they're basically saying that Goop's damage when lit was too much and it slowed too much, which obviously would be an issue for 5v5, especially for sieging on turrets. Like, you could put a Goop under turret and ignite it and it would just churn a turret down in maybe 2 Goop cycles. So a significant decrease to the damage that Goop does. But they're trying to make Scarf more reliant on poking with his Spitfire by making that a complete 11, which means he's going to have a bit more early game presence, especially in the lane. So yeah, basically saying Scoop did too much damage, really, really good at sieging turrets, especially in 5v5, also in 3v3. We're trying to make Scarf a bit more reliant on actually hitting his skill shots, which is his projectile speed there. Basic attack has gone up by 0.5. Suri Strike cooldown is increased. Okay, wow, that's a pretty significant Suri Strike increase because she would be very mobile in 5v5. And Death from Above lock-on range has gone up. Weapon Power Sky here is getting a bit of a love, but her mobility has gone down quite significantly. Going to make Weapon Power Sky probably viable in 3v3 a bit more because that's a pretty significant weapon power range increase. Yeah, I like that. But the significant nerfs to her Suri Strike mean that she's going to be a bit less mobile. Still think Sky's good. Okay. Mac perk time reduced from 4 to 0. Perk reduction. Bonus weapon power increased. Stack duration increased. Crystal ratio reduced. Crystal ratio on bleed reduced. Base damage increased. Okay. So, nerfing late game CP Taka, but giving him a buff to his base damages, meaning that he can have more impact as soon as he unlocks X-Retsu. He is going to be much better with his Aftershock spike now. Like, just with Aftershock, I think that he'll deal a bit more damage. I'd have to check on the numbers, but I feel like 20% doesn't equal 50 on Aftershock CP, so he's going to be better with his Aftershock spike. It just means he's going to be able to clear his jungle a bit more. Also means Weapon Power Attacker gets a bit of love, so Weapon Power Attacker in 5v5 is supposed to be pretty good, so keep an eye out for that. Basic attack range increased. Chain Lightning secondary target damage decreased. Target's crystal ratio decreased. Chain Lightning no longer deals weapon power damage. Yeah, see your weapon power barrier. Also means that crystal power barrier is going to be slightly less oppressive. Way less oppressive, actually, to be honest. That's a significant nerf and a significant crystal power nerf. So she's going to be more of that first target that she's focusing. She's not going to deal ridiculous 5v5 damage. And in 5v5, she was going to be ridiculous if she chained between 5 people dealing this amount of damage. It also means she's going to be less oppressive in 3v3. Range reduced by, whoa, pretty significant margin. So she's not going to be able to chuck that from different... significant distance. The damage on Arc Recursion has been gutted, but you're still going to get the mobility. Varia will still be okay, like the range increase and the fact that she can still hit that first target with pretty significant damage, she's going to be okay. But you're definitely going to have to play her the alternating current build now. You can't really play her for Stormforged build. You can't play her weapon power. That is, I'm glad about that. I mean, you could still play her weapon power and deal significant damage to the first target, but no longer are you going to deal weapon power damage across multiple targets. This is one of the reasons why Varia was good. Varia is okay now. Varia is okay. Let's have a look at Vox. Whoa, CP Vox is back! Basic attack range has been increased by a significant margin, but everybody's had their basic attack range increased relatively, so While we talk about that, it means you'll be able to be safer in lane because you're staying further away from the minions, but it does mean when it comes to taking duels with other heroes, because all of their basic attack ranges have been increased, Vox isn't really going to have, a significant change in terms of his matchups. Maybe with Ringo, because that's a 0.6 range, and I don't think Ringo got a massive increase in range. That's probably makes his matchup with Ringo better. So his weapon power has been nerfed, but he now gets base 20 CP. So basically they're taking... He gets a higher mixed damage at level 1 now. So... But he'll have a slightly less... He'll have slightly less damage at level 12. So... In general, weapon power Vox got a bit of a change. He'll scale slightly less hard because that's a 20 weapon power nerf off the... Oh, it's a 40 weapon power nerf off the bat. So that's a pretty significant hit to his weapon power, but he does get 20 CP, and then he'll get an extra 32. He'll get an extra 24. So he'll get the difference in weapon power will be made up with CP. So he'll technically deal the same damage in inverted commas, but it won't be weapon power damage, and obviously the crystal power won't be affected by the penetration of armor and stuff like that. And obviously people buy Aegis, so that's going to get reduced quite significantly as well. The range on Sonic Zoom has gone up and the weapon power scaling has gone up, just to mean that using your Sonic Zoom for an offensive capability is going to be rewarding you for the lower damage output. But this means that CP Vox gets a basic crystal power ratio. CP Vox, which is going to be very good in 5v5, might even be viable in 3v3 now, boys. And the ranges on his bounce range has been increased by 2, so you're going to be able to bounce further. He's going to be way more obnoxious in lane. Whoa. Yeah, CP Vox, that's a thing now. CP Vox is a thing. Okay, now looking at the items. Book of Eulogies, melee heal increase from 50 to 65. Great for melee laners, simply because in 5v5 you were going to be stuck in a 1v1 matchup, and if that 1v1 matchup was bad, like you had a range disadvantage, that would be very difficult for you to sort of survive in. It just means that also they're going to be more viable in 3v3. Great nerf Clockwork into the ground, because that item was stupid. In general, they're reducing the cost of boots. I won't talk about it too much, but it just means that you're going to be it's going to be more easily accessible to pick up higher tier boots because of how big the 5v5 map is. That movement speed is going to be important. I'll talk about Critical Strike now, before I talk about Poison Shiv. They're reducing Critical Strike damage, but they are increasing the tier 3 Critical Strike items in terms of other ways. So Tornado Trigger is getting a attack speed increase, and Tyrant's Monocle is getting a 20 weapon power increase. I will tell you my thoughts on that in a second. But in general, Critical Strike overall is getting a slight nerf, but the items themselves are getting buffs, in my opinion. So Tornado Trigger and Tyrant's Monocle, my goodness, I had a brain fart there, are going to be slightly better in general when you don't crit. So they're basically making the items better for when you don't crit. When you do crit, obviously you're going to lose some damage, but when you don't crit, the items in general are going to be more consistent. Which I think kind of defeats the point of Critical Strike. I think Critical Strike should be a non-consistent mechanic. If you're going to include Critical Strike in the game, it has to be about that chance of getting a Critical Strike. But now they're just going to be a bit more consistent items. Poison Shiv gets a buff. This is going to make it very good in 3v3, but I think Poison Shiv as an item in 5v5 will be hard to use, simply because it's a single target application of mortal wounds, and there are 5 heroes, so it's going to be difficult to use Poison Shiv unless you're using it as someone like Vox, and you can kite for ages, and you're going to use the lifesteal, or you're using it to dive onto a hero that gets a lot of healing, or you need to pick it up if you're diving a hero that has the backup of a Grace or a Lyra, for instance. So it has its specific circumstances, but in 3v3 this is going to be a very good item now. Talked about Tyrant's Monocle, that's a pretty good buff in general for when you don't crit. Tyrant's Monocle builds are going to be good. It means that Tyrant's Monocle on its own is good, but then you combine Tyrant's Monocle, like if you get 2 or 3 Tyrant's Monocles, it's going to be slightly worse, I guess. I don't know, I'd have to work out the maths on the 5% Critical Strike nerf. It depends on the amount of weapon power that you've got, but Tyrant's Monocle in general is going to be far more consistent of an item, and I think this is going to be a very, very good item. Attack speed increased, great, Cruel's going to be happy. I don't know how many other people would buy this apart from Cruel, maybe Arden, I don't know. Spell Sword, I think that's an important nerf. Ringo got nerfed as well. Ringo was really the only, maybe Ringo and Glaive were the only 2 heroes making massive use out of Spell Sword, so it still will be a good item for those specific circumstances, like Alpha can still use it, for instance, but it's just not going to be as good. Stormcrown changes to make it more of an objective-focused item, so don't build Stormcrown on Taka, don't build Stormcrown on Alpha, just don't build Stormcrown unless you're looking to farm or take turrets or global objectives. This is probably the best change in the entire item change. This has been reduced to 600 gold so you can purchase it at level 1. This is going to open up viability for so many junglers because their clear speed is going to increase at level 1. This feels like, for most people, will be the level 1 jungling item because of how good it is at clearing... Like, how good it is at now clearing the jungle. Like, this opens up CP Fortress way more easily. Taka is going to make good use of this. It's just such a good item now to pick up level 1 for junglers, even in 3v3. This is a great change to make it open up the meta in terms of the junglers that are viable. Well, we don't talk about talents because they're not important. So... thank you very much for watching. If you did watch this whole thing, it's a crazy long video, but it was a crazy long update. So I'll put the timestamps in the description so you guys can skip to where you want to skip to. And thank you very much for watching, guys. And I will see you on the rise, I guess. Haha.